Standing fearlessly for the truth is one of the greatest qualities any human being can possess, but very few in history have demonstrated this quality the way Imam Hussain Rav did. His stance in Karbala remains one of the most extraordinary examples of moral courage, integrity, and steadfastness ever recorded. His refusal to surrender to oppression was not a momentary decision, but the result of a life built upon the foundations of faith, righteousness, and the teachings of his grandfather, Prophet Muhammad. Understanding this stance requires looking deeper into his character, his mission, and the impossible circumstances he faced, yet still chose the path of truth. Rav did not stand for himself. He did not stand for worldly leadership, power, or authority. He stood to preserve the essence of Islam, an Islam that teaches justice, equality, mercy, and accountability. When the political leadership of his time began twisting religion into a tool for control, corruption, and tyranny, Imam Hussain Ra recognized that silence would mean allowing falsehood to grow unchecked. His stand was rooted in the belief that the truth must be protected even if it costs everything. The world around him was changing. People were afraid to speak. Many had compromised for safety, comfort, or temporary gain. Hussain Ra could have chosen silence like the others. He could have saved his life, his family, and his companions by simply agreeing to the demands of the ruler of the time. But the grandson of the Prophet understood that fear-based silence is dangerous. When falsehood rises and truth remains quiet, injustice begins to appear normal. Imam Hussain Raid believed that no believer should ever allow wrong to overpower right simply because standing up for the truth comes with difficulties. His fearless stand was not driven by anger or rebellion. It was driven by principle. He knew the consequences. He knew he was walking into hardship. But he also knew that Islam was never meant to be a religion of passive acceptance of injustice. The Prophet Ali himself had taught that speaking the truth before a tyrant is the greatest form of jihad. Hussain Ra'av embodied this teaching perfectly. When he refused to bow to oppression, it was not a political disagreement. It was a spiritual decision. He believed that leadership within the Muslim Ummah must be defined by righteousness, humility, justice, and the fear of Allah. Allowing a corrupt leadership to go unchallenged would mean betraying the trust his grandfather had placed in the Muslim community. It would mean letting future generations inherit a version of Islam that had been twisted and misrepresented. Even when threatened, Imam Hussain Raid remained calm, composed, and firm. His clarity of purpose gave him a strength that cannot be measured by numbers. Although he had only a few supporters, he was not intimidated by the overwhelming forces standing against him. His strength did not come from armies, wealth, or weapons. It came from his soul, from his faith in Allah, and from his unwavering belief that truth, no matter how small it appears, will always outshine falsehood in the end. His journey from Medina to Makkah and from Makkah to Karbala was filled with opportunities to turn back. Many tried to advise him. Others begged him to remain silent for the sake of his own safety. But Hussain's Array repeatedly explained that his stand was not optional. It was a responsibility. It was a duty. If he did not stand, who would? If he, the grandson of the Prophet, showed fear, then what example would remain for future generations when they faced injustice? When he reached Karbala and realized that the opposing army intended to cut off water and prevent his family and companions from even the basic right of life, he still did not lose courage. His heart was full of compassion, not hatred. His strength was shown not only in battle, but in patience, dignity, and self-control. Even under the harshest conditions, he continued to advise, remind, and guide people toward righteousness. His fearless stand revealed a deeper truth. Real courage is not only in fighting oppression, but in refusing to let oppression change who you are. Standing up for truth does not always come with immediate victory. In worldly terms, Imam Hussain Rav and his companions were few, surrounded, and ultimately martyred. But the true victory of Karbala was not measured by numbers or survival. It was measured by impact. His sacrifice exposed injustice, awakened the Ummah, and preserved the moral compass of Islam. His stance became a guiding light for generations, teaching people that power does not make something right, and weakness does not make something wrong. Throughout history, oppressed people, reformers, scholars, and ordinary believers have drawn inspiration from Karbala. His courage has become a timeless example that a believer must stand with truth regardless of the consequences. His sacrifice showed that truth is powerful even when supported by only a handful of people. It showed that falsehood is weak even when supported by armies. Imam Hussain also teaches that truth requires sacrifice. Sometimes it requires giving up comfort, safety, relationships, or even life itself. But the reward of standing for truth is eternal. Those who live for the truth never truly die. Their legacy becomes a source of strength for others, and their stories continue to inspire long after they leave the world. Today, when we reflect on the stance of Imam Hussein's Arave, we find that his message is still relevant. In a world full of injustice, corruption, and moral confusion, his example reminds us to be brave, to be honest, and to be principled. It teaches us to speak when others remain silent, to choose integrity over convenience, and to remember that Allah supports those who stand for righteousness. In the end, Imam Hussain Rae showed that truth may be challenged, but it can never be defeated. He showed that fearlessness does not come from strength, but from sincerity. He showed that real power lies not in ruling the world, but in ruling your own heart with faith and conviction. Sacrifice to protect the religion. Imam Hussain Raif. When we speak about Imam Hussein's Raif, we are not simply remembering a historical figure, we are recalling a man who gave everything he had to protect the soul of Islam. His sacrifice was not driven by desire for political authority, power, or leadership. It was driven by a deep responsibility to preserve the true teachings of Islam, teachings based on justice, compassion, truthfulness, and moral integrity. Imam Hussain realized that if he remained silent in the face of corruption, the Ummah would lose the essence of the religion his grandfather, Prophet Muhammad had established with so much sacrifice and mercy. The rulers of his time wanted Islam in name but not in practice. They used religion as a tool to justify their actions, turning leadership into monarchy, governance into oppression, and worship into a show of power. This was not the Islam that the Prophet had taught. It was not the Islam that defended the weak, protected justice, and called people to live with dignity. Imam Hussain Raif recognized that if such leadership became accepted, future generations would inherit an Islam mixed with tyranny and corruption. He could not allow this to happen. He knew that standing up against such power would come with unimaginable hardship. He knew that by refusing to pledge allegiance, he was placing his life and the lives of his family in danger. But Imam Hussain was not a man who feared death. He feared only one thing, the distortion of the religion of Allah. His mission was to protect Islam in its pure form, to ensure that the values of truth, justice, and righteousness remained untouched. His journey toward Karbala reflects the depth of his commitment. When he left Medina, he did not leave with an army or with weapons in his hands. He left with his family, including women and children. If he were seeking power or war, he would never bring his family with him. But his message was clear. He was going for the sake of Allah, not to start a rebellion. His presence along with the family of the Prophet was a sign that this was a moral stand, not a political ambition. At every stage, Hussein's Raif tried to avoid bloodshed. He spoke to the rulers. He advised them, he reminded them of their responsibilities. He warned them about the consequences of injustice. But his sincerity was met with arrogance and threats. The political system had become so corrupt that speaking the truth became a crime punishable by death. Yet Imam Hussein's Raif never wavered. He would rather sacrifice everything than let Islam become a religion where tyranny was considered acceptable. When he reached Karbala, the situation became even more severe. His companions were few, while the opposing army was vast. They cut off the water supply, depriving even children of drinking water. Yet even in such harsh conditions, Hussain Raif remained calm, patient, and firm. He continued to emphasize that his goal was not to fight, but to uphold the values of the Prophet. His sacrifice was not just physical, it was emotional, spiritual, and moral. Perhaps the most heartbreaking part of the sacrifice was the presence of his family. He saw his loved ones suffer thirst. He saw young children cry. He saw his companions fall one by one. And yet he remained unwavering because he knew that giving up or compromising with falsehood would destroy the Ummah. The strength required to make such a sacrifice is beyond human imagination. Only someone with extraordinary faith, courage, and trust in Allah could endure what Imam Hussain endured. His companions also understood the purpose of this mission. They did not fight for victory in this world. They fought to preserve the honor of Islam. One by one, they gave their lives knowing that their sacrifice would echo throughout history. Imam Hussein's Raif lost his beloved sons, his brothers, his nephews, and some of the most loyal companions any leader could ever have. Each martyr was a testament to the truth that standing with Hussain Raif meant standing with Allah's truth. Imam Hussain Raif himself was the final offering in this sacrifice. Even in his final moments, he was not concerned about himself, he was concerned about the message he was leaving behind. His last words were prayers, reminders of Allah, and expressions of submission to his decree. This shows the purity of his heart and the sincerity of his intention. He gave his life not as a warrior hunger for victory, but as a servant of Allah determined to protect his religion. The result of this sacrifice was immense. Although he was martyred physically, his message became immortal. His martyrdom awakened the Ummah. It exposed the corruption of the rulers. It reminded people of the values of the Prophet. It restored the spirit of justice and accountability. The very people who remained silent before were shaken into awareness after Karbala. The truth that might have been buried under political power was resurrected by the sacrifice of Hussain Raif. Karbala teaches us that religion cannot be preserved by comfort or compromise. It is preserved by courage, sacrifice, and sincerity. Imam Hussain Raif became a symbol of resistance against oppression in every age. He showed that protecting Islam sometimes requires giving up everything, including life itself. His sacrifice is not a story of loss, it is a story of victory truth over falsehood, of righteousness over injustice, and of moral clarity over political corruption. Today, when we remember the sacrifice of Imam Hussain, we must understand its message deeply. Islam is not protected by numbers, power, or politics. It is protected by people who refuse to let the religion be twisted or misused. People who stand for justice. People who are willing to sacrifice comfort and even life for the truth. Imam Hussain set the highest example of such commitment. In every era, his sacrifice reminds us that the true teachings of Islam must be safeguarded no matter what the cost. He saved the Ummah from losing its direction, he preserved the integrity of the faith, and he ensured that the message of the Prophet would remain pure and uncorrupted. His sacrifice continues to inspire millions across the world. It teaches us that the value of religion is greater than the value of life itself. It teaches us that truth must be protected even if the whole world stands against it. Above all, it teaches us that the path of Allah is worth every sacrifice, a timeless example of patience and faith. Iman, patience and faith are virtues often spoken about, but seldom lived with perfection. In the history of Islam, there is no event that demonstrates these qualities more profoundly than the tragedy of Karbala. Imam Hussein's the beloved grandson of the Prophet Muhammad, displayed a level of sabr, patience, and tawakkul, trust in Allah, that continues to inspire the hearts of believers more than 14 centuries later. Every moment of Karbala is a reflection of his unwavering strength, unshakable belief, and deep spiritual connection with Allah. When Imam Hussein's Azhar began his journey, he already knew the path ahead would not be easy. He was aware of the political corruption spreading in the Ummah, the moral decline of leadership, and the increasing distance from the prophetic teachings. Yet he did not react with anger or hatred. He responded with patience, wisdom, and dignity. He chose a path that would protect the future of Islam, even if it meant personal suffering. This choice itself was a sign of his immense faith. The patience of Imam Hussain was not passive, it was active and purposeful. He practiced the kind of patience that stands firm in the face of injustice, that remains strong even when the world around you collapses. It was the patience of a believer who knows that Allah is watching, that Allah's promise is true, and that Allah supports the righteous even when outward circumstances seem impossible. As he traveled toward Karbala, he faced challenges at every stage. People warned him, advised him, even begged him to turn back. But Hussain never hesitated. His trust in Allah was complete. He knew that the path of truth often comes with hardship, but the believer walks it with courage and contentment. He frequently recited verses and supplications, reminding everyone around him that every difficulty faced for the sake of Allah is a source of reward and honor. When he finally reached Karbala, the true test of patience began. The opposing and water was denied to him, his family, and even innocent children. Hunger and thirst became unbearable. Yet, despite these conditions, not a single word of complaint escaped his lips. Instead, Hussain encouraged his family to rely on Allah. He reassured them with words of hope and comfort, even though he was suffering more than all of them combined. One of the most moving examples of his patience is seen in his treatment of the enemy. Even when they blocked the water, even when they threatened him, even when they disrespected the family of the Prophet, Imam Hussain did not respond with cruelty or harshness. His heart remained soft. His character remained noble. He still offered advice, still invited them to truth, still reminded them of Allah. Such behavior can only come from someone whose soul is deeply connected with his Creator. On the day of Ashura, when the companions of Imam Hussein's were martyred one by one, each death was a wound to his heart. But he remained patient. He watched his beloved nephews, brothers, friends, and even his own sons sacrifice themselves. Yet he continued to place his trust in Allah. His patience was not the patience of resignation. It was the patience of strength, of purpose, of conviction that Allah's decree is always filled with wisdom. Perhaps the most heartbreaking moment of Karbala was watching his infant son, Ali Asghar, suffer from thirst. Any father's heart would shatter at such a sight. But Hussain, with tears in his eyes and faith in his heart, raised his child and asked only for water, not for mercy or luxury, just water. The response he received from the enemy was cruelty. Yet even then Hussein's did not curse them. He remained steadfast, knowing that Allah sees every injustice and that the reward of patience is far greater than revenge. His trust in Allah reached its peak when he stood alone near the end of the battle. His family had suffered unimaginable pain. His body was wounded, but his spirit remained unbroken. He stood with strength, proclaiming that if the religion of Muhammad could not survive except through his death, then he was ready to give his life. This was not just patience, it was a declaration of complete surrender to Allah's will. Imam Hussain showed the world that patience is not weakness. It is one of the strongest forms of worship. It is the recognition that every hardship is a test, every test is an opportunity, and every moment spent for the sake of Allah brings one closer to Him. Hussein's wrath transformed suffering into worship, pain into devotion, and hardship into spiritual victory. His patience was also a deeply personal form of faith. It came from knowing Allah, loving Allah, and trusting Allah with absolute certainty. He did not complain about hunger or thirst because he knew that Allah sees and rewards every sacrifice. He did not lose hope because he knew that Allah never abandons those who stand for truth. Even at the peak of suffering, Hussein remained calm, composed, and spiritually elevated. Karbala is not just a story of pain, it is a story of powerful faith. It teaches us that patience is not simply holding back tears, it is holding on to Allah when everything else is taken away. It teaches that faith is not proven in times of comfort, but in moments of difficulty. It teaches that true believers rise higher through struggle, not ease. For the Ummah today, Imam Hussein's RA example is a timeless reminder. When we face hardships, when we witness injustice, when life becomes painful and overwhelming, we must remember the patience of Karbala. We must remember the strength of Hussein RA. He faced suffering far greater than anything we face, yet he stood firm and trusted Allah completely. His story reminds us that no matter how dark the night becomes, the believer's heart must remain filled with light. Ultimately, the patience and faith of Imam Hussain turned Karbala into a universal lesson of courage. His endurance transformed temporary suffering into eternal honor. His steadfastness turned physical loss into spiritual victory. His trust in Allah turned a battlefield into a classroom for generations, a message for the entire Ummah. The everlasting lesson of Karbala, the tragedy of Karbala, is not merely an event to be mourned. It is a message to be lived. It is a lesson that echoes across generations, reminding Muslims their responsibility to uphold justice, truth, and moral integrity at all times, no matter the cost, no matter the pressure, and even if one must stand completely alone. The legacy of Imam Hussain Arai is not confined to a moment in history. It is a moral compass for the entire Ummah, guiding hearts toward righteousness in every era. Karbala was not about power. It was not about politics. It was a divine stand taken to protect the soul of Islam. The message Karbala delivers to the Ummah is universal: truth must be defended, justice must be upheld, and righteousness must be lived. Even when it brings hardship, isolation, or danger, Imam Hussain Arai showed that the path of Allah is not always easy, but it is always worth walking. When he stood against a tyrant, he knew he was outnumbered. He knew that the odds were against him. But Hussain Arai taught the Ummah that numbers do not define right and wrong. Popularity does not define truth. Victory is not measured by worldly success. It is measured by staying firm on the principles taught by Allah and His Messenger. Karbala is a reminder that sometimes justice stands with the minority while corruption hides behind the majority. One of the most powerful messages of Karbala is the idea that standing alone for truth is better than standing with thousands for falsehood. Imam Hussain Arai could have chosen silence. He could have chosen safety, but silence in the face of oppression is not neutrality, it is support for injustice. His refusal to bow to the corrupt leadership of his time was not an act of rebellion, it was an act of responsibility. The Ummah is reminded through his sacrifice that every believer has a duty to speak the truth, even before powerful opponents. Every Muslim today faces moments, big and small, when they must choose between comfort and conscience. Karbala teaches that the believer chooses conscience. Whether it is speaking up against cruelty, supporting the oppressed, resisting corruption, protecting values, or standing firm in personal struggles, Hussein's Arai example shows that the price of silence is greater than the price of sacrifice. His message is clear: if you do not stand for justice, injustice will eventually stand over you. Karbala also teaches that righteousness is not defined by worldly success. In worldly terms, the small group of Hussain Arai was defeated, but in spiritual terms, they achieved an eternal victory. The tyrant had power, soldiers, wealth, and authority, but Hussain Arai had the truth, and truth does not die. That is why today, the name of Hussain Arai is remembered with honor, while the name of his oppressor is remembered with shame. This is a message for the Ummah. Do not be deceived by the temporary shine of falsehood. Do not think that truth is weak simply because it is outnumbered. What matters is not how many stand with you, but whether Allah stands with you. Imam Hussain Arai taught the world that Allah supports those who support justice, even if they are only a handful. Another essential message of Karbala is moral integrity. Imam Hussain Arai did not just speak truth, he lived it. His character was pure, his intention was sincere. Even when facing oppression, he did not abandon prophetic manners. He did not lie, deceive, curse, or seek revenge. He showed that justice is not just about opposing wrong, but also about upholding good character. The Ummah must understand that righteousness is not only about what you fight against, but also what you stand for. Karbala also calls the Ummah to unity and responsibility. When leadership becomes corrupt, when society drifts away from Islamic values, and when the weak are oppressed, silence becomes a form of betrayal. Imam Hussain Arai reminds us that every Muslim must care about the direction of the Ummah. We must care about justice in our homes, communities, governments, workplaces, and the world. The believer is not passive. The believer is active, awake, aware, someone who refuses to let injustice become normal. The message of Karbala also extends to personal life. Every individual experiences moments of difficulty where they must choose between right and wrong. Sometimes doing the right thing isolates us. Sometimes it requires sacrifice, losing friends, comfort, popularity, or ease. Karbala teaches that standing alone for Allah is more honorable than standing with the world for anything else. It teaches that the loneliness of truth is better than the crowd of falsehood. Furthermore, Karbala teaches the Ummah the importance of courage, not the courage to fight, but the courage to be moral. Imam Hussein's RA battle was not a military one, it was a moral one. His bravery came from faith, not weapons. He showed the Ummah that real bravery is refusing to compromise on values even when pressured. That true strength is standing tall even when wounded. That real victory is staying righteous even when suffering. Karbala's message also includes hope. Despite the darkness, despite the oppression, despite the suffering, Hussein Raif never lost hope in Allah. He believed that Allah's justice prevails, even if delayed. He believed that no sacrifice is lost in the sight of Allah. This hope is a reminder to the Ummah that no matter how difficult times become, whether personally or globally, we must never fall into despair. Allah sees, Allah responds, Allah rewards. Today, when the Ummah faces challenges, wars, injustice, oppression, division, corruption, and moral confusion, Karbala stands as a timeless reminder that the solution lies in standing with truth, refusing injustice, staying united, and living with integrity. It teaches that Islam is not protected by fear, silence, or compromise. It is protected by courage, sacrifice, and sincerity. Imam Hussain left the Ummah a message in the form of his life and death. If you live for truth, you will die with honor. If you die for truth, your message will live forever. And this is the ultimate message of Karbala.